Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I am an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 17 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I run Strength Guild, so I'm a coach of various athletes. I also do Highland Games, strongman, powerlifting, kind of anything that has to do with strength.
Yeah,
so.
You got to pause and think about all the things you compete in. Over the years, you've always been the resident competitor. Not many people, in my experience, compete as much as you do in as many different things, but that's what makes you cool.
Yeah, there's a Highland Games today. They were trying to talk me into stepping back out on the field today, and I was like, I was real close to doing it, but I got that big meet coming up in November. I was like, I'm going to be the smart older man and say no.
Yeah,
so,
right, yeah.
I'll come back to that when I don't have something else. My luck, I'll go out there and tweak something.
Right. Especially because it's more explosive and sort of athletic and like.
Yeah, and I just haven't done it in a while.
Yeah,
so.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you didn't prep for it really. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We have a little bit of news as usual. We're going to talk about protein today because it's back in the news. A lot of listeners know that's one of the things that I've researched in the lab. I mean, we have a book. Actually, Phil's on the cover of that book. There's an ad mid-show where we talk about the science of protein, like what's out there. Now, the truth is with a book, you can only present information up to the point that the book is published, right? That's one of the drawbacks. But there's a huge volume, like collection of stuff, from culinary stuff to cell chemistry and potential side effects. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today because, again, protein, almost the protein witch hunt is sort of in the news. But before we get there, let me offer a few tidbits.
Strength and muscle sport news.
A lot of listeners know that in addition to protein, that we also, I think all of us on the show have an interest in coffee. There is a New York Coffee Festival coming up in mid-October, October 13th to 15th. So if people are really interested in coffee, there's educational talks. It's like all the coffee you can drink. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. I'm sure there'll be a little alcohol there and things like that as well. But I'm very interested in learning more and more on the culinary side because everything that I look at is the physiological response. What does coffee or caffeine do to your nervous system or whatever, explosiveness in lifts. But I'm increasingly interested in the food science part of that, especially because we went to that food science, that big convention in Vegas this past summer. So yeah, the New York Coffee Festival, check it out, October 13th to 15th. We may give a lecture there on the health effects of coffee, but that's not really the reason I'm going, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to do that yet. So there you go. Check it out if you're within driving distance, I think, of downtown New York City. Just Google it. What else? I mentioned the coffee festival. I'm bouncing around here, but I am drinking prototype coffee that I brewed this morning. I can't really talk more about it. Phil knows, but stay tuned for updates. There's some very interesting things that I think you can do with coffee to enhance sort of the nootropic effect, concentration or central nervous system things, which I've been looking at over the years. I really focused on performance, of course, but there's some really interesting things you can do with coffee, and I'll let people know. Like, part of this is a taste test. Phil, I'm going to have to send you like a batch so you can taste it too. My number one concern is does this taste really good? And so anyway, so that'll be fun to kind of give people updates on that. Again, it's sort of just a project of mine, but after a while, you're in the lab all the time or you're in the gym all the time. It makes you wonder about, if you're an authority on something or you've learned a lot about it, why not advance the field in some way? So that's kind of where I'm going with that. So sipping on my special coffee here, I'll let people know. And let me add, how many times over the years have you seen a website or a magazine sort of talk about this research batch nonsense and try to generate a buzz? That's not what I'm doing here. I'm really drinking this. This is just something that I do. It's just a project. So, and I know, Phil, you have an interesting coffee. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this protein news here. John, through IronRadio.org, sent an email, and then this is starting to blow up all over the social media as well. Australian bodybuilder with rare disorder dies eating high-protein diet. This is from CNN. Let me give you the quick rundown if you haven't heard about this. This lady, Megan Hefford, she's a 25-year-old bodybuilder from Australia. She was found dead in her apartment. She's a mom, right? So this is a tragic thing. Essentially, she has urea cycle disorder. If people aren't familiar, the urea cycle is a very important aspect of your liver. It's a biochemical pathway, and if you eat lots of extra protein, right? Protein is the only macronutrient that has nitrogen in it, and you need to turn that into urea, and then your kidneys can filter, that urea into urine, hence the name. But if you can't run your urea cycle and turn extra nitrogen from amino acids and protein into urea, which is a waste product mostly, it has some body fluid effects as well, but you end up with lots of ammonia, right? Essentially, bleach building up in your bloodstream, and it can be very toxic to your nervous system. So if I look at Twitter, which I did this morning, I was looking at, I think it's Joey Antonio's feed, but there's a variety of things going on Twitter. And there were some interesting comments on here about what we should really be doing is educating the people about underlying disorders, right? Here's one from Chrissy Kendall, PhD. She says, how about we educate the public on rare genetic disorders rather than continue to spread information about dietary supplements? It's a good point. So good on her for sharing that. So, Phil, I know that on our Facebook sort of forums, Iron Radio listeners page, you had made a comment about if this was carbs and diabetes, no one would be doing this.
Yeah, and it's just fact. I mean, if some lady or man had, was type 2 or type 1 diabetic and, they ate a bunch of donuts and died, there wouldn't be this big play. Like, oh, the Dunkin' Donuts killed her. No, she screwed up.
Right.
It was her disorder that killed her.
That's right.
And it's,
Yeah, the analogy is a really good one, right? I'm not sure. Now, I know there's a lot of anti-carb sentiment in like the fitness community, but I can tell you the healthcare community is reluctant, or at least it has been over the decades, to sort of give equal treatment to carbs, like they kind of demonize proteins and fats for whatever reason, and even with the realization to scientists that there are many different kinds of fats and that kind of thing. And we're going to talk after the break, everyone, about different kinds of protein too. There's different levels of protein quality and, and that kind of thing, but it's a good point. If she ate a donut, a diabetic person, who was really out of control, or had some other carbohydrate disorder, ate a donut and died, I don't think you'd see it anywhere. Which is interesting, right? Because if carbs are so benign to a big chunk of the sort of healthcare authorities, I don't know.
One thing I wish that they reported, I would love to know how much protein she was eating. How much, because it says she just overdosed on protein. How much?
Yeah, it's a good point.
I'm betting it wasn't as much as everybody think. Oh, it was probably a gram or less per pound a day. It would be my guess.
Yeah, this is saying just high protein diet. And you know what, I can tell you by presenting research on how high protein diets don't harm your kidneys and they don't weaken your bones and all of that sort of thing over the years, one of the first things you have to do, is define the dose, right? Yeah. Is what do you mean by high protein? In fact, I started changing my wording to ample protein intakes or higher protein intakes, meaning higher than the average Gen Pop person who might eat 15% of their calories from protein. I think a lot of lifters, you're going to see more like 30%, and they've set all kinds of limits. And again, the book that we talk about mid-show it really references a lot of that stuff, how little evidence there is. So, by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that CNN piece that I saw that I was turned on to from John. That's by Susan Scutti at CNN. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. I think it's a reminder. Maybe we could talk about what we do with clients or patients and that kind of thing, and yeah, what high protein is, stuff like that. What else? Any news from the lifting world? What's going on at Strength Guild?
Oh, well, we got the Highland Games today. I'm busy, as usual. It's going to be a busy fall. I have a youth competition coming up for some of my weightlifters, and then like 2 weeks after that, up to the American Open Series. And then weeks after that, out to California for all of us are gearing up for the Record Breakers meet. So, where I'm going to, I would say attempt, but I'm going to squat 700 on a fake hip. So,
yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, that's about it.
I don't want to sound like the worried grandma, but I don't have to tell you to be careful. You've been around a lot.
That's the only thing I worry about nowadays. It's not the only thing I worry about squatting is like, as far as I know, I'm in uncharted territory. Like I don't think a hip has ever been tested in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing I worry about. Is like, what happens if this thing flies apart on me in the bottom of a squat?
Yeah.
So
well, like you said,
no.
If something goes wrong, it's going to go way wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to go a little bit wrong. So we'll see. I mean, everything feels good. I haven't went over much over 610, but I don't need to. Mm-hmm. So until real close to meet, but like I said, everything feels good.
You don't get to pick your spotters, do you?
No, but knowing Jesse, I mean, this is going to be a big meet, and I'm going to be in the flight with the big lifters, and they'll have 4.
Well,
I think what is it? And once the bar reaches 6, I think they're required to have 5 spotters.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So yeah, you have 2 on each side and 1 in the back.
Right.
So
it might be worth saying something in advance. I don't know.
They all know.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
So, I mean, they all know what I'm dealing with.
And I know you don't want to be like, I'm give the old man special attention. His head might pop, you know. But still,
no, I mean, I'll let my way up there and get it done. But no, I feel good. I mean, I'm light, so the real eating starts here in about 4 weeks. So I want to get to 280. Is where I'd like to be. I'm about 262 right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm up from where I was, but I feel good. It's hard to eat. For me, like summer's the worst because it's so freaking hot here.
Yeah.
It's hard to cram yourself full and then go stand in a gym that's 100 degrees.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I get it.
You're just miserable. So
yeah, the gym where I train bodybuilders in Akron, there's no central air. I mean, he's got some big industrial fans, but that's about it. Yeah, Midwest summer, rough.
Yeah, it's just so. No, other than that, we're getting ready to put out the Barbell Open again.
Oh, right.
So that's going to be coming up. And this year, I decided to take some big moves, and I've got the okay from USA Weightlifting and from USPA, so it's going to be sanctioned this year. So the open portion will be just as it was, not sanctioned. You can't really sanction something online, but that will lead to real meets that are basically the open is the qualifier. Mm-hmm. You can't do the meet unless you qualify through the open, and then you'll go to a real sanctioned powerlifting or weightlifting meet. So pull that off. Other than that, man, just gearing up. I mean, the Olympia's coming up, and we're back. This year's flying by. So
yeah, it sure is. Agreed. I mean, we're going to have a slightly shorter episode today, everybody, partly because, the semester starts. And, this is something Phil and I do to give back. And at the same time, there's realities with how much time we have certain times of the year. So
yeah, oddly enough, I get kicked in when college and stuff gets back in, too. Because I get kids leaving who come to see me all summer to get in shape. Mm-hmm. And then I have the kids that are coming back to universities locally here.
Right. Makes
so
sense.
I get this change of the guard. There goes those kids. Okay, here comes these ones. Let's get them all rolling. And it's always interesting to see who got stronger over the summer and who didn't. Yeah. I was like, okay, how much did you lose?
Yeah. Summer's always sort of weird for me because on one level, it seems like there's a drop-off in people engaging with stuff like podcasts. And then on the flip side, people are getting more active in other ways. You know, it's like funny. Like fall becomes like once things settle, maybe by late September, it's fun. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Temperatures are cooler. Yeah. Like you were saying, you just mass gain phase, stuff like that. It becomes a very fun time of the year, and then things really kind of kick up in the fitness world. And I would argue probably around February, March, people start thinking about getting that fat off of them again. But summer is always that weird season. Like people are out doing vacations and stuff. Yeah, but it's hard to gauge, like you said, who's getting stronger over the summer. Like if you want to make gains relative to your competitors, summer might be a good time when other people are screwing around. I don't know.
Well, oddly enough, I mean, the winter months, well, fall, winter, and spring is also when like the big stuff happens in fitness in general. Well, in the strength world, I guess we got CrossFit Games right in the middle of summer, which happened. But I mean, as far as the Olympia, the Arnold, the World's Strongest Man, the blah, it's all. Yeah. It's usually not right there in the hottest months.
Right.
So,
colder months. Yep. All right. Before we go to break here, I want to let everybody know we have an Iron Radio intern helping us out, Kayla. She is setting up an Iron Radio Instagram page. I actually started one. I'm not going to put a bunch of lifting stuff on mine, but still, there's some of the things that I stumble across, like that coffee festival. I'll mention it on the show. But my Instagram is just Lonnie Lowry, all one word. So I know not everybody can spell that well. I'm not going to spell it out for you, but Phil, I know you put some stuff on Instagram too. When we had the guys from Mind Pump on, they put a ton of stuff on their Instagram page, and I thought, well, that's just something I've never really done. I kind of do Twitter and nothing else. Yep. I really don't like Facebook and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Check it out. It might be some fun stuff. If I do something in the kitchen, and usually it's got sort of a health-related recipe or something, or some of my favorite quotes or stuff like that. But I'm trying to keep the Lonnie Lowry Instagram page separate from the Iron Radio Instagram page. But I just want to have more presence out there and cross-pollinating and stuff. You know, we've always been that, well, if people can find Iron Radio, good, they win. and if not, then, you know, we've got our own people to deal with. So
yeah, our marketing staff is not very good.
No.
So.
Yeah. Well, like you were just saying, you got a gym to run, I got classes to teach, and a lab to work in, and you know, it's the authenticity is the price. You know.
Yep.
So. Okay. Let's go to break. When we come back, I've got some further questions about protein and the kind of messages that we would share as coaches or dietitians with clients and patients. So we'll be right back. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everyone, we're back. It's Phil and Lonnie, and we have Dr. John Mike with us, and we're going to wrestle a little bit more with protein. There's lots to talk about in sports nutrition and protein and that sort of thing. I was mentioning Joey Antonio, Dr. Jose Antonio. He's got a lot of this sort of stuff spilling out onto his Twitter feed. You might want to check that out through the International Society of Sports Nutrition. He'll put a little image up. One of the things that came out that honestly confuses me a little is there was a paper that came out in the Journal of Nutrition last year. I think it's Gorson and colleagues, but the title on this little Twitter summary is Wheat versus Casein versus Whey Protein, which increases muscle protein synthesis more. And this is what I find odd. It says, results, casein wins. Consuming 35 grams of casein was superior to 35 grams of whey or wheat. Now, I'm not surprised about wheat, right? Wheat has gluten and proteins like that in there. They're not very high value, right, as far as traditional ways we look at protein quality. But the fact that it's increasing muscle protein synthesis more than whey, I find that very odd, right? Because my understanding is that whey, because of the leucine content, the amino acid profile is fast. It gets in your blood fast. It's got a lot of leucine, right? It's got that critical 3-ish grams of leucine, and it triggers growth, muscle protein synthesis. This actually says after the meal, there was a greater rise in muscle protein synthesis with casein. I'm going to have to dig into this more. We might even have Dr. Antonio come on, or Stu Phillips, or someone who's a real authority in this. Again, I'm not surprised there was a lower anabolic response, muscle tissue-wise, to the plant proteins. It is worth noting, though, that this is not the first time I've heard that you can simply consume more plant proteins, and it does, at least partially, compensate for the lower quality. So I don't want to bore everybody with the details, but there are different ways over the years that we've looked at protein quality. Not just complete, like animal proteins are complete, right? Milk and eggs and meat, versus incomplete, which is plants, because they're missing one or more essential or indispensable amino acids. But there's, over the years you've seen on containers of protein, like PER, protein efficiency ratio, there's biological value, there's the PDCAAS that I talk about in sports nutrition class, the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. But the point is, all of these things, they try to look at, again, the digestibility, how valuable, in a sense, for growth the proteins are. Because protein is not a preferred fuel in the body, right? It's more of a building block thing for immune system, for muscle tissue, for just lots of things, certain hormones, enzymes. So there's lots of ways to look at the protein quality, and I don't know, John, have you seen anything about this, casein being actually more anabolic than whey?
No, I haven't actually. It's kind of interesting because, when you think of the anabolic properties of amino acids, there's always this battle of like whey versus casein and which one to take before or after, and there's combinations that they've done in studies with Stu Phillips and other known researchers. But typically, whey is a little bit more anabolic. Casein, most people usually take casein at night because it's just slower digestible. But then you can take it after workouts or mix with whey and casein. It's just it's kind of like saying what gets you bigger biceps, like barbell curls or dumbbell curls?
Yeah. No, it's
so
good.
It's just,
I agree. I think the take-home message, one of the reasons I wanted to even bring that up, I don't want to confuse people, but I think a take-home message might be that dairy proteins are really good. I mean, if you're going to put a value judgment on them, right? Whey and casein, a lot of people realize, but milk is mostly casein, about 80%, about 20% of it's whey. The curds in cottage cheese, that's casein curds, right? And a lot of our listeners know these things, but I really don't differentiate. I tend to consume whey casein blends when I get like a protein powder, so right. Just I would consider that. I wouldn't leave meat out of the picture. I don't think any of us are going to do that because we just like to eat, In fact, there's one more bit on here from Dr. Antonio's feed. Weight training plus lean red meat increases health-related quality of life. So they took 100, in this case it was women, and they took older women. They had them weight train twice a week for 4 months, and then they consumed and added 160 grams per day of cooked lean red meat versus carbs, right? A similar amount of carbs. The result was that the lean meat group improved in overall health-related quality of life as well as muscle strength, again, in relation to the carb group. So that's from Torres and colleagues, British Journal of Nutrition, just this year, 2017. So, you can really simplify this down, and maybe that's the value of having a podcast like this, is eat lots of meat, drink your milk. Whey is also good, those sorts of things. So
get some high-quality protein. Train hard.
Right, that's right.
right.
Yeah, and even the stuff about you can make up for some of the lesser value, the lesser quality of plant proteins by simply eating more. Okay, bring it. Eat a pound of pasta instead of half a pound. I don't know. Yeah. So, all right. So here's some questions for you guys. Phil, let me ask you this, and I'll ask you too, Dr. Mike. But why do you personally seek extra protein? Or is that probably not even the right way to say it? Do you really seek extra protein, or are you just eating huge amounts of food in general?
No, I think I definitely lean towards that.
Yeah.
I lean that direction, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's good. It's delicious.
Yeah.
I personally, I like a big steak. I don't want to sit down and have a huge thing of mashed potatoes and a little tiny steak. It's just not as satisfying.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, I get it.
Switch it up, vice versa. And I don't know. It's part of that. It's cultural, and then that's the way it's always been for us. It's you had your meat and potato. The side was the side. But I mean, it also, I think a lot of it is, I know it keeps me full longer. I don't have to eat as often. I'm not starving. So, I mean, I really don't track it. Now, I did more when I was dieting down because I have to. But now, because of the sheer amounts of stuff I'm eating, I don't have to, I know I'm getting that much. Just by default, I'm getting enough. So I don't have to be anal about
quality.
Make sure you get your protein in.
Right.
Because I know I'm going to sit down to a pound steak tonight and something for lunch and something, whatever.
Right.
So
yeah,
I just make sure I have something with every meal.
That stuff that came out last year from Robert Wolf's lab, where he was suggesting 70 grams may have advantages for whole body, I think it was, muscle protein synthesis over the typical 20 to 40 that you often hear. And it just kind of comes back to this old idea Arnold Schwarzenegger even used to promote, which is, I rather get a little excess than not enough.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
unless you're dieting, like you're saying, but even then, if it's lean sources of protein, if it's chicken breast or round steak and things like that, okay, what about you, John? Do you purposely seek extra protein? And if you do, why? Is it recovery? Is it for the building blocks? You personally?
It's really for everything. I mean, one of the things that I've done probably over the last maybe 8 months or so. I mean, I've always eaten a lot of protein for the recovery purposes, for the anabolic purposes, but really, I mean, I'm not eating huge amounts of food right now just because I'm not in competition mode. But I mean, I always have some type of protein with every meal. I mean, with breakfast, it's usually 5 or 6 eggs. So with every meal, it's something, whether it's chicken or turkey or whatever it is. But it's also, if I'm not in competition mode, I mean, my RMR is typically between 4 and 4,500 calories per day, and most of that is I've actually eaten a little bit more fat and higher proteins and kind of lower the carbs, just kind of gradually over the last several months. And I've maintained my same body weight, which is, I mean, it's not a huge culture shock. You know, most people will actually really tell you that, but I don't really know of a lot of strength athletes that don't eat high calories or don't eat high protein and expecting to either maintain a high ratio of lean body mass or get leaner or maintain a respectable level of strength like without it. You know, so I mean, the more calories that you consume, obviously your total protein requirement goes down. You know, the lower the caloric content, your total protein requirement actually goes up. But you know, if you want to lower carbs, and there's different, you know, methods to really use. I mean, if you want to lower your carbs, and the protein requirement and the fat, you know, typically has to go up. So I've actually upped my fat intake a little bit and maintaining higher protein, and I really haven't seen huge decrements in strength. Probably the biggest decrement I've seen is just within my deadlift, and I'd say it's about 50 pounds. But you know, because I just recently moved, you know, my training and my strength has kind of gone down a little bit, but I'm still maintaining, you know, body weight. But yeah, it's for the recovery, it's the satiety, it's you know, resting energy expenditures, thermic effect of food, like it's all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, I as the sort of token guy who is double majoring, that's not the right word in grad school, but I was sort of going to school in two departments. And so my advisor, Peter Lemon, who's a very famous protein researcher, he'd say, Lonnie, I need you to go over to the experimental kitchen and make no-bake protein cookies. And I would make them with whey and casein and soy, so we could do comparisons and research and whatnot, and that kind of stuff. But I remember one of the things he said back then was, because I'm like, can't we just give them the shakes? And I remember him saying, well, you know, most people simply cannot comply with a diet that's more than 50% liquid, you know, for the long haul. You can do that for a while, but to your guys' point about it's satisfying to sit down to a big steak, you know, and that's, I think the cookies, it kind of played that role. They were just sort of peanut butter, chocolate, oatmeal, but then they had scoops of the different proteins, and it also gave me a lot of insight into how different they were and how you would disguise them if you wanted to with different flavors, you know, like peanut butter, cover soy, you know, stuff like that. But
I think a lot of people forget too, like when it comes like to the steak and the actual meat. I mean, yes, the first thing you think about is protein, but it also has other important nutrients and micronutrients in them too. Like meat has like zoochemicals. It's got CLA. It's got, you know, conjugated linoleic acid. I mean, it's got healthier fats. It's got omegas. Like it's got other things in it.
Carnosine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, meat has, believe it or not, meat has creatine in it, but I mean, you would have to eat like 10 pounds of uncooked steak to get the relative same quantity as you did taking 5 grams of creatine. But
of a supplement, yeah.
So it's got other things in it that are just equally important.
Right on. Yep. It's a good point. You hear so much about phytochemicals, right? PHYTO from plants. And then, yeah, you overlook the stuff like the carnosine and the creatine and things like that. It should only make sense, I would think, if you can let go of a lot of strong personal beliefs and look at just the ecosystem, like the food chain. Of course, meat is going to be very nutrient rich, right? Those cows graze on low quality grasses all day, so you don't have to, in a kind of, you know, thing. So, yeah. Okay, so we kind of covered my second question already, which is, do you pay attention to specific proteins? It sounds like not so much. And let's face it, if you're eating copious amounts of food, it's probably not a problem. Get yourself some dairy, eggs. I love eggs for breakfast. I kind of go back and forth between either I have oats and berries with a whey casein mix tossed in, or I have eggs. You know, I go back and forth just because they're culinary-wise, you know, it's just different experience, I guess. But yeah, obsessing over whether something has a slightly higher biological value or PDCAAS on the quality scale, you know, I don't think it's a huge issue. A lot of the really incomplete proteins that you talk about over the years, and I talk about this in sports nutrition class as well, like gelatin or collagen. There's even some interesting research out there that they may have some value to satiety themselves. You know, and that kind of stuff. I wouldn't be seeking those things for maximal muscle protein synthesis. But again, yeah, there's a lot of good things about that. And I think we've all seen the typical person who overdoes it. Now, I'm not bashing all vegans. I will never be one, but you've seen ones that overdo it, and they do seem to be almost look deficient or emaciated in some way, like not robust, and I can't help but think it's because they're nibbling on low amounts of plant proteins, and in low doses, those aren't going to be the equal. They're just not. All right, so Phil, what would your message be? Like, you get a new person who comes in, and I know it's very goal-oriented, so maybe you can just talk about, different types of goals that are common for you, but what's your message? Like, they come in, they're like, maybe they have no idea. They're like, I'm confused about the media, what it's saying about protein. Is it harmful to me? Should I eat more? Which ones? What do you say to clients when they come in?
Oh, my biggest thing is just the average client is just trying to get them to eat real things. Is step number one. It's like, let's eat real food. That's always step number one. Now, if we're talking an athlete, this and that, somebody that's training hard, I always lean towards that. Let's aim for 1 gram per pound, of lean body mass, and just try and eat, get something every meal. And that's what, going back to your last question, I think part of it is like, I don't have to seek it now, but I think it's part habitual. I've done it so long that I don't think about it.
Yeah.
When I go to eat, I just end up gravitating towards that, because I've done it for 20 years. So it's just making that habit of, don't miss this chance, to get some kind of quality protein source. I don't care what it is, because over time,
that's it. Right?
I'm not going to have the same protein at every meal for weeks on end. So over time, it's going to pan out.
It's a good point.
Chicken for breakfast, eggs for lunch, tuna for dinner, whatever.
Because that could be a rookie mistake. Like, you're right. I think we're all three of us are going to gravitate toward those traditional bodybuilder, powerlifter type foods. Eggs or egg whites, and I actually still like, even though technically the protein quality is slightly lower in egg whites versus whole egg. Sometimes I ate so many egg whites. Sometimes I feel like an egg white, I don't know, omelet or something. But anyway, I digress. But at the same time, the rookie mistake would be that, nope, I'm going to eat nothing but chicken every day, or I'm going to eat nothing but whey protein powders, and then you miss out on some of the zoochemicals, like John, you were saying. And in fact, I can tell listeners, there was one instance in my life where I was overemphasizing whey casein so much, and I donate blood fairly regularly. Just, it's a good thing to do, and my family tends to have kind of high hematocrits and whatnot. So, I actually ended up, like, not anemic, right? My red blood cell count wasn't low, but some of my serum ferritin values were actually low, because there's an old school clinical term called milk anemia, and I think the point being is that, you're not getting that heme iron from the meats and that kind of stuff. And I actually was low iron. I was really fatigued, and I asked the doctor, am I low thyroid? It didn't even dawn on me. As a nutritionist, it really should have. But, I got away from some of those traditional things, like that variety you guys are talking about. I overdid it. And if there's a risk with the supplements, I think that would be it. That it's laser focus on one thing, like a too narrow of a focus, would be one of the problems, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for that. Like when I was dieting down, literally I ate the same thing for like 4 months.
Yeah.
But that was for my ease of life, So it's like, okay, it's noon, so I get this. But other than that, once I'm away from that area, that's peaking for an event type of thing.
Exactly. Temporary.
It's keeping it more diverse, just change up your vegetables, change up your protein sources, change up your fat sources, it's get in some kind of variety. And then honestly, I think the average athlete out there, collegiate athlete or whatever, even high school kids, most of them, I would say, are undernourished. They don't eat, they eat enough crap, but not enough good stuff.
Most college people are the same way.
Yeah, and it's just they're not eating enough good food, and it's getting them to realize that if you're eating good food, you can eat a lot and get and maintain that same body weight.
Yeah.
But your performance will go up. So it's just getting them to lean towards that, like we've talked about a bunch, of 80-20 or 90-10. If you're eating the good stuff, it's okay to have the cookies afterwards. You know, you're not going to want a dozen cookies if you just had a 16-ounce steak and some broccoli. You're not going to have room. Mm-hmm. So you can have one. You know, so it's changing that mindset and getting them to eat real food. And then it's really, I don't know, there's always the argument that it's way more expensive, but it's not that bad. And honestly, like me and my wife have talks about this all the time. It's where you choose to spend your money. You know, instead of going out and partying or buying this or buying that, we tend to gravitate towards buying quality food. You know, and that's our choice.
Priorities.
But yeah, it's where do your priorities lie? Do your priorities lie in staying out till 4 a.m. getting trashed, or eating quality food and performing well?
Right.
So
then you only have enough money, like as a college student, for a greasy microwave burrito and a bag of cheese curls. You know,
and that's your fault. You know, don't tell me that it's too expensive, and then I catch you posting Instagram pictures drinking $8 drinks. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's worth saying, too, although protein is the most expensive food in the grocery store in many ways. Like, for example, you can buy huge bags of beans or rice, which, by the way, if you mix them together, pretty complete. But, you know, the skinless, boneless chicken breast and some of the protein foods are going to be more expensive, but you don't have to spend huge amounts of money to eat well, like you keep saying, real foods, right? So less processed stuff. But it's a good point. If you don't prioritize it, my concern as a nutritionist, I guess, is that you would end up being victimized by the food industry, because they're about sales. I could tell you, coming from that Vegas conference, everything that they talked about was from packaging to coloring to flavors and everything else is to get people to buy more. You know, now they're interested in the safety of the food and that kind of thing, but there was not an automatic connection with health and nutrition like I expected there to be. There was some. There's a clean label initiative, and they're trying to use natural colors, phytochemical type colors, anthocyanins for blue, and you get the idea, the reds and oranges from nature to color foods, and that's good instead of red number 5 and junk like that. But I think it's important for people to know that's what we're talking about, right? When we say real food, we don't mean artificial flavors and colors and tons of added high fructose corn syrup and weird emulsifiers and gums and 20 ingredients in the list, you know, the ingredients list, but simpler stuff, and it doesn't have to be that expensive. Cans of tuna and salmon, you can make salmon patties.
Yes.
You know, stuff like
Eggs
that.
Are still fairly inexpensive, you know, things like that. It's not that hard. I mean, if I could do it going through graduate school on like no income,
right,
anybody can do it. You know, that's like we've talked about. I was eating those cans of mackerel. I was like, oh, this is horrible, and I'll never do it again.
Yep.
But I did what I had to at that time.
Oh, I admit,
I'm actually had some like mackerel we buy at the store that's like in olive oil or whatever. Like it was actually kind of good.
It's hard for me to eat tuna. To be honest, canned tuna, I ate so many thousands of cans. Yep. You know. Because it was at the time, I think it was like 50 cents, 65 cents for a can of tuna, and I would sit there on a bench in the gym before I even left, and I would wash it down with a big orange juice or something like that. But again, it was that attempt to have actual food, you know, instead of some expensive junk. I don't know. John, what about you? Your message to students or clients when it comes to, you know, what do I do about protein? I'm just confused.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a black and white issue. I think it's very different. It becomes more psychological, I think, for most people than really anything, than more like physiological. Because I remember like working with some of the teams, you know, back, you know, when I was coaching more regularly, it's like they would rather eat, you know, even probably more females than males. I mean, they would rather eat like 4 or 5 biscuits than a couple like chicken tenders, you know, or something like that. But it's just, I mean, it's almost like you have to kind of like make yourself do it if it's something that you're not really used to really doing. I mean, it depends on what sport it is too. I mean, if you're in a sport like rugby where it's, you know, very dynamic and you're expending a lot of energy, I mean, you need to be eating and consuming a large amount of calories. I mean, the college age male, you know, needs 3,000 to 3,500 calories basically just to walk around campus.
Yep.
You know, that doesn't include, you know, the amount of energy you need for recovery and lifting and you know, activities and stuff. And college age active females, you know, you're looking at, you know, 1,800 to 2,200, maybe up to 2,500, depending on if they're really heavily active with sporting, especially in the end season. But the thing is like most schools and universities don't have a sports nutritionist or registered dietitian on hand, and a lot of them that are in different departments don't always work in conjunction well with with the coaches. So I think that's something that you're starting to see a lot more in the recent years. But I think it's just being conscious of and aware of what you're eating, why you're eating it, and for a lot of people, like I said, it's more psychological really than anything. I mean, I could have like 4 or 5 donuts right now, but I guarantee I'm going to feel and look like crap, than eating my normal, types of food. But sometimes, you can, carb cycle a little bit, depending on how you actually really use that and what it's for. So yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's no one answer. You know what I mean? No.
I like what you said about it's largely behavioral too. You know what I've actually, it's worked for me pretty well is oftentimes, like for example with diabetics, there's a concept called carb counting, but I sort of bastardized that and protein counting. Like if I try to count up and make sure I get a gram of protein per pound every day, and again from whole food sources, fairly lean whole food sources, that works wonders for body composition and recovery and things like that. Because if you're full of chicken or some steak or whatever, you're not full of the high fructose corn syrup kind of milkshakes and French fries and junk, because it's got satiety value and all of that sort of thing. So I think that idea of sort of protein counting can be a real advantage. Like last night, for example, we got pizza with the family, and I'm trying to, tighten down my diet a little bit in some ways. So we had some pre-cooked chicken breasts that we keep in the freezer because behaviorally it's easy for me to grab those. I know they have more sodium and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to worry about that. But anyway, it just chunked it up and put it on every piece of pizza. So then instead of just eating my usual 6 or 8 pieces of pizza, I would have 2, and they're just laden. They already had they were like a spinach chicken kind of white pizza or whatever, loaded up with the chicken, the pre-cooked chicken on top, and it's sort of add the protein to it. That way I'm not going nutso on a half a dozen pieces of pizza, and I'm just trying to. In that case, I guess it's a little bit of meal rehab in a sense, but.
Well, I think for your athletes, that's essentially a lot of them, especially college age or younger, that's all they really need to pay attention to. If they just get that in and the calories, it's going to work out. They're not going to eat as much just by getting that protein in. By default, they're not going to eat as much crap.
Right. You got to eat something. Right.
Because they're going to be full.
Right. Right. So. More to actual eat. And let's face it, I mean, there's tons of research. I've got some of my own I need to present, and I know Dr. Antonio I mentioned earlier with guys that were lifting weights, but they were eating copious amounts of protein, and they were no fatter because of it. Like if there's I know like the typical dietitian approach is all calories count, it's calorie balance, but don't tell me that 500 calories worth of skinless, boneless chicken breast is the same thing as an Arctic orange shake at McDonald's. It's not going to do the same thing to your body composition because the way you have to process it, your metabolism. So,
well, and just what you're getting out of it.
Right.
Macro and micronutrient wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's totally different. So,
all right. Well, so again, short episode this week, everyone, but school's underway. Check out the Instagram pages, Twitter pages. We're all over the place now. We're making a conscious effort with this stuff. I know Dr. Mike has those social media accounts as well. Check us out. Google it, whatever. I also want to offer thanks to a few Iron Radio supporters before we go. Nathan, Matthew, Robert, and Fred. You are, again, it's random. You're the guys that I noticed are supporters. We appreciate what you're doing. You keep Iron Radio going. Again, it's sort of public radio style format. And there you go. So practical tips this week on protein, especially with all the hysteria in the news.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Until next week.
Right.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store, one for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.